Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the Kid Lit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of Kid Lit Love. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kid Lit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie, and I'm here today with Arianne Costner. She's a middle grade author here to talk about two of her books with us together, My Life as a Potato and Confessions of a Class Clown. Now, I first found her books because, admittedly, I was looking for a lighter read in between two really heavy adult fiction novels that I had read, and a book with the title My Life as a Potato seemed to fit the bill. But what I've learned about her books is that, yes, they are funny and they are lighthearted, but that doesn't mean that they aren't full of important ideas and lessons for middle grade readers too. So let's get to our conversation. Arianne, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, I'm excited to talk with you today. Let's begin with kind of some typical introductions. Can you give us a little bit of your backstory of who you are, where you are, and a little bit of your life as a middle grade writer?
Sure. So I have always really enjoyed writing, but I actually came into college hoping to be a physician's assistant. And as I was in college, I decided that I would just kind of take some creative writing classes on the side for fun. And as the year progressed, I realized that I was really looking forward to my creative writing classes, and I was dreading my sciencey classes. And it hit me one day like, wait, this is the rest of my life. Of course, being a physician's assistant is going to pay a lot more, but I want to do what I love. And I decided to become an English teacher. So I started taking the pedagogy classes. I really loved them. And I only taught 1 year of 7th grade English. After that, I had my first child and I decided to stay home with my kids. But that 1 year of teaching really impacted my whole life because it introduced me to literature for that age group, and I fell in love with it, and I decided that I wanted to try for the first time ever to write my own novel. And that's how My Life as a Potato started, I guess. I thought of the idea just looking at a mascot, thinking I wanted to write a mascot story because I love the secret identity trope. My husband thought of making a potato because he heard of a real school in Idaho that had a potato mascot. And I just fell in love with the idea, drafted the whole thing super quickly. I think I started when I was pregnant thinking of the idea, and I was able to write pretty quickly because I only had one baby, and yeah, that was the story of my first novel. I got really lucky in that the first book I wrote got published. That doesn't happen too often, but I did have a lot of editing to do because let me tell you, it was not super great at first. It took about a year of serious editing before it was ready.
That still is a really fast timeline. I think one of the things I've loved learning on this podcast is that most of the authors that I get to talk to, they've always loved writing or literature or books or something related to that in some way. But most actually started doing something else before they indulged that side of their life. And so to know that you first went from physician's assistant and then to English teacher and then now getting to write those novels. I just love hearing the backstory of how someone finally arrived at what they are supposed to do. And I love that it was I'm certain I shouldn't say easy, but I guess from what I hear of how difficult it can be to get that novel published, to have your first book be the one that goes out in the world is quite quite a feat, I think, right?
It really is. And sometimes I feel a little too lucky. I'm like, okay, when is it going to come back and bite me? Like I've written two full novels and they've both been published. And I've written a third novel and I'm trying to get it published. So I'm like, fingers crossed. But at the same time, if it doesn't get published, maybe it's fair. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I hope it's not fair and it gets published just as easily as the other two.
I hope so too. It's really fun, but we'll see what happens.
So why don't we talk a little bit about your first book, My Life as a Potato? You already mentioned a bit about the mascot, a bit about where the potato came from, but can you give listeners an idea of what that book was about?
Sure. So there is a seventh grade boy named Ben, and he moves to a new school in Idaho. And he's hoping to have a fresh slate and make himself kind of more popular than he was at his old school. The problem is on the first day or the first week of school, he gets pressured in the cafeteria to participate in this game where he throws a hot dog and to see how often it bounces. And I actually took that from my experiences in elementary school. We had kind of a little game like that going on. Anyway, so he throws this hot dog kind of to look cool. He's really not used to being like a bad kid. And the mascot comes in for a little pep rally and trips over the hot dog and sprains his ankle. So behind the scenes, Ben makes a deal with the coach, the basketball coach, that he will play the potato mascot. And this is really embarrassing because everyone thinks that the potato is super dorky and he doesn't want anyone to find out about it. But he's living this double life as a potato at the same time he's trying to deal with friends, and there's a little bit of crushes and just seventh grade drama.
And is that seventh grade drama taken from your year as a seventh grade teacher?
Definitely. Yeah, there are definitely characters in there that I tried to think, what would this student say in this situation? Or what would,
Yeah.
I guess it says at the very beginning of books, this is not based on real events, but authors kind of laugh about that. They're like, well, everything's kind of based on real events, but
Right. There's a
it's
piece of
where we get
something.
our inspiration. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed that book. And like I said, I originally picked it up because I was in between two very heavy adult fiction books. I try to balance my reading life to be 50% adult literature and 50% children's literature because I teach children's literature classes. I love it so much. And so I knew I wanted something in between those heavy reads. And as I said, the cover, the title, I thought, okay, this is perfect. And it was funny. It's about a potato mascot. I mean, something you don't hear every day, but the situations that the character goes through, they are real and they are something that middle grade readers will be able to connect with and learn from.
Mm-hmm.
Even my own inner seventh grader, our inner child as an adult could do that too. And so I really appreciated the nice balance that you had between real events and things kids face and situations they go through, even if they are as fun as throwing a hot dog, to that more whimsical side. It's nice to have.
Thank you. Yeah, I really wanted to write something that was more lighthearted and fun because I had also been reading a lot of more heavy literature at the time. And I was like, I just want to cleanse my palate a little. Like,
Yeah.
I just want to laugh. And there are, some deeper themes, but it is meant to be just more a fun book that can hook reluctant readers, especially. And
Yeah.
the first thing that really hooked me about the idea is I just had in my head a vision of a giant potato mascot on the cover. And that image of the future cover is what kept me editing it through rejection after rejection after rejection. I'm like, this has to be a book. Like, kids will gravitate toward the potato. I know them. So when they finally showed me the actual cover, it was so similar to what I had in my head. And it was a really cool experience to see that.
Yeah. And that is exactly why I picked it up, because I saw the cover and then saw the title of the book. So let's move to your more recent book, your second book, Confessions of a Class Clown. And I know there is a bit of humor in this one too, right? We go from
Mhm.
potatoes to T-Rex, I would say,
Yeah.
based on the opening of the book. But can you tell readers a bit about that book and what you hoped to accomplish in writing that?
Sure. So this one is about a boy named Jack who is a self-proclaimed class clown. It's what he feels he's the best at. And even though he has a lot of great acquaintances at school and people like him, and he starts trends and he has a popular like YouTube channel, I call it something besides YouTube, but it's basically a YouTube channel. He has a hard time making and keeping real friendships. So there's a school talent show coming up, and he has a plan to do some crazy stunt at the talent show and become viral. However, he needs a partner to accomplish this, and his latest friend is becoming very distant. So he hears about a school speed friendshipping program after school. And speed friendshipping, I've really done these in the past. They're really fun. They're basically like speed dating, except for friends. You're trying to meet and talk to different people. And he thinks this sounds super corny, of course, but he figures he'll play it off as a joke and just try to find somebody to help him with this stunt for the talent show. And after he goes there, his life starts to intertwine with these three other main characters. And you get perspective shifts in the book where you get to see what each of them think about each other. Um, and the real point of the book is that everybody in middle school has their own challenges that nobody can see, that social media can't capture, and everybody has their own insecurities. Everyone might be taking the wrong message away from an interaction and misunderstanding people. So it's really a book about empathy and a book about connecting with people and valuing friendships over social media.
Something I think our world, everyone in our world could use a little bit of information on. It's a really hard time. I often say I can't imagine growing up as a young kid right now with the amount of social media that they have to deal with and navigate and figure out how to live with. I mean, I'm dating myself, of course, but when I got to go home from school, I got to go home and I got to put the day behind me. And now social media just follows everybody around. There's so many skill sets that you have to learn about it and with it and around it. And it's hard enough being a middle schooler, let
Totally.
alone adding this in. So what
Yeah. And oh,
choose?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
oh,
Continue.
no, okay. Just a little delay of the call. I was just wondering what made you choose to put that kind of an aspect into your book.
Well, I do have a sister who is a teenager. Um, I'm quite older than her, but just seeing and talking with her about how social media impacts her. And also, I work with the youth in my church, and talking with them. It really is a big challenge. And I felt like this topic would be really cool to explore in literature. I came up with the funny YouTube stunts, and the speed friendshipping program is kind of like a vehicle to really discuss this idea. And every main character in the book has a distinct relationship with social media and kind of things that they have to learn about it. So Jack, for example, he kind of struggles with a phone addiction, I guess you could say. There's a part in the book where he actually gets his phone taken away as a punishment, and it's really, really difficult for him, because he finds so much of his identity online, and he cares more about getting clicks and likes online than he does about caring about people in person. So that's what he has to learn. There's a character named Brielle, and she was based off me a lot, and also my sister. She compares herself a lot. She kind of focuses mostly on the negative things that people say on her channel instead of the positive things. And she needs to learn to let all that go. And actually, by the end of the book, she decides that this app that she uses is kind of a toxic force in her life and that she can do without it, and she gets rid of it. There's a boy named Mario, and his mom doesn't let him have social media. He doesn't have a smartphone, and he wants this more desperately than anything he wants in the world. And I've seen these kids too, where their parents don't think it's right for them, and the kid really wants it because they feel left out. So he's feeling a little bit excluded from people's inside jokes. And by the end of the book, he kind of comes to an understanding and an agreement with his parents. And he kind of recognizes that his parents do want what's best for him. And then the last character, Tasha, she probably exemplifies like the most healthy relationship with social media out of everybody, because she uses it to forward her creativity. She does fashion, and she uses it to kind of connect with other fashion accounts. And anyway, so it can, social media can have positive purposes, but I'm hoping that it can just spark a lot of discussions where kids are thinking, how am I using social media? Even if they don't have it, surely they're on YouTube and they see YouTube stars. And what am I being presented with? And how is that curated? How is that not real life? How should I not compare myself? Different questions like this, I think that we all need to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like no matter who the child is, where they're from, what kind of family they are in, there's a place for all sorts of kids in this book. They will likely see themselves in one of those characters as it relates to their social media use or not use, which will, give them an entry point to have these kinds of conversations. I think as an educator, I can appreciate that too, because I'm constantly thinking of matching books to readers, of which book I think a reader needs at which time. And this book could give a lot of conversation starters for the classroom as well as at home with parents, with caregivers, on how social media does impact kids and their mental health and what that means and how it fits into their world. So it seems like a big springboard for just some big life lessons that could be talked about too.
Yeah, I hope so. And I tried really hard to make it not too didactic. Like, I didn't want there to be one strict answer, but I did want it to be like, you have to know yourself, you have to work with your parents, and you have to recognize when things are becoming unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Which again, lessons for adults could apply could apply here as well with social media.
Totally. Yeah.
So in thinking about, because you've mentioned you've written the third book, you are working to get a book like that published. What are you hoping for your writing in the future after these two books? What are you hoping comes next?
Well, I really hope I can publish this next book. Yeah, the thing is, even if you win the lottery and are able to publish with a big publisher, it's never really guaranteed.
Right.
Even an author that gets a great deal, they can write another book and the publisher can just say, we're not interested in this one, sorry. So fingers crossed. I want to just keep writing books for the middle grade age group for a while. I've written a lot of picture book, but that is a big challenge to get into that market. It's a very competitive. But fingers crossed, maybe one day I can wriggle my way in. And one day I'd love to write a young adult novel as well. I don't see myself ever getting into adult, but one day it would be fun to do young adult. And another thing I'd love to do is branch out of humor and go into more literary or light fantasy.
Okay.
Which is a tricky career move to make, because a lot of times you kind of get, pegged in a certain genre. But
Right.
I have a fun light fantasy I'm working on right now that I'd love to get published.
Well, that's great. Not too long ago on the podcast, I talked with James Preller, and he's written over 80 children's books at this point. So the Jigsaw Jones series, Scary Tales, Exit 13. And one of the things he said something similar is that he's worked really hard to not be in a box, if you will, to constantly try something new, whether it's a format, a character, a genre, a something, so that his writing career is following his interests and following wherever his boundaries are shifting. So I can definitely make that connection there. You're right. So you get known for one thing, everyone expects you to stay in your lane, sort of. but that's not fun, right? You want to try
Yeah.
new and different things. And I love that you're thinking of, writing for kids that are younger than what you're currently writing for in picture books, as well as moving into young adult. I love all of them. So what
Okay.
kinds of books, can I ask, like what kinds of books do you love to read personally?
Ooh, so personally, I enjoy some adult nonfiction. I recently read Man's Search for Meaning, which was very inspiring. Um, I my most recent adult fiction read was Salt to the Sea. It's a historical fiction about World War II, but it was done in a really creative way. And I loved it. It was beautiful. But I do mostly read children's literature because I have 4 children. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old and they're both fantastic readers. And then I have 2 younger ones that read picture books. Um, but we've read a lot of classics this year. I love the read alouds, like the older books like Paddington, Winnie the Pooh, stuff like that. I just find so charming. I find them timeless. Um, and they have such great vocabulary. Um, so yeah, we've been reading a lot of that. We recently read Sarah Plain and Tall, which they enjoyed. Now we're reading the sequel, Caleb's Story.
Yeah. There's nothing better than sharing books with your own kids. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
And yours are just, well, you're busy. 7, 5, and 2 younger ones. You're reading a lot. They're doing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a special kind of bonding that can happen. So I'm wondering, I can't wait till when they might, 7, when are they going to read your books?
Funnily enough, they've actually listened to both of my books already on audiobook.
Yeah.
I don't know, because when we're in the car, we'll listen to audiobooks all the time. And they asked to listen to my books, and I'm like, I really don't think that you guys will care for these books very much. They're more for older kids, but I mean, I don't know how much they absorbed, but they said they like it. And hopefully when they get a little older, they can reread them in the
Right.
actual book format and hopefully pick even more out.
Yeah. And how special that will be to not just share a book together, but to share your book together. Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. Oh, I love it. Well, where can readers and listeners, I guess, find you, find out more about you online, connect with you, and grab some books for themselves?
So I do have a website, ariannecostner.com, and there are some fun things on my website. Like there's a little quiz that tells you what kind of potato you are, just, for kids or adults. There's like a book trailer for educators. There are some teaching supplemental vocabulary, supplemental activities. Um, and then I'm also on X at Arianne Costner. I am trying to be a little more active there and connect with teachers, but I'm kind of on and off. And then I'm also on Instagram at author Arianne Costner. And I've been trying to put my family book recommendations on there, since I do love reading aloud to my kids. So I'm hoping to update that more with recommended reading.
Wonderful. Well, I will be sure to put the links to these in the show notes as well. And you're right. I will be going to find out what kind of potato I am, because then when I
Awesome.
introduce your book to kids, I can tell them, it's just another hook in to get them to be excited about reading the book. So what a fun, what a fun idea. Well, thank you so much for coming on to talk about both of your books. I'm urging listeners to find you online, to go grab a copy, and keep our fingers crossed for that third one as well. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Kid Lit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of kid lit love. Thanks for listening.